Look, this was always going to be hard, but it didn't need to be this complicated. And the way it wouldn't have been this complicated is if at the beginning, when we, the people, made this tremendous sacrifice, economic, social, personal, to go into lockdown, the federal government had had an actual plan with timeframes on it, which they followed, in which they actually got the country ready for what was going to come on the other side. There are two words to talk about strategy here that I think are really important when thinking about this: security and predictability. You want, on the one hand, security in health, and you want it in the economy. And for a while, those are going to require unusual things from us. In the economic dimension, there's going to have to be a tremendous amount of government support of the economy, of wages in particular, to say nothing of businesses themselves, in order to allow people to do what they need to do in order to be secure from the virus. But the other thing you need is predictability. And that is particularly true in the economy, right? We need to say, 6 months from now, we will be doing X. Here's where we expect to be. And that's also true in what we're doing with the virus. People are not going to lock down forever if they don't believe the time is being used well and if they don't see what's coming on the other end of it. The word quarantine comes from an Italian word for 40 because it was 40 days originally when we were doing this many years ago. The federal government completely has failed to execute a plan. And so what they've been in is an incredibly costly holding pattern that they are now no longer willing to pay the cost of. It is the most profound and far-reaching failure of political leadership probably in our lifetime.
Yeah, I want to go back to a tweet that you did in April, end of the month, April 29th. You said, Donald Trump does not want to be in charge of any of this. He wants to play president on TV. He doesn't want responsibility for governance in time of crisis. And in every way he can, he's refusing to do that job and lashing out at those who ask him to do it. And Ezra, that's what we're seeing in the point you just made about the guidelines being announced of, we want to close things down. We want people to socially distance, the White House guidelines. But after issuing the guidelines, they had no strategy whatsoever on how to achieve something beneficial during that time period. It's like the guidelines came out and they just sat there and hoped.
Guidelines are not a plan. And also the president never followed the guidelines. I mean, to this moment is not following the guidelines, is routinely contradicting them. The whole thing is wild. But think about a hypothetical here. Imagine this was the Obama administration. Imagine it was the Hillary Clinton administration. You remember, as I do, Lawrence, just a couple of weeks ago in, I think we now call it Stimulus 3.5, that it was described as a concession to Democrats. There was $25 billion and a mandate to have a national testing strategy. Can you imagine a Clinton administration on this, how desperate they would be for the money to do testing, how many bullet points their testing strategy would have? A normal federal government, and not, by the way, not just a Democratic one. If Governor DeWine was president, if Mitt Romney were president, if Marco Rubio were president, they would be desperate to have a plan here, the financing for a plan and a structure for a plan, and to be carrying it out so that when they ran for re-election this year, they could say, we saved the country from this. But Donald Trump, the reason that was a Democratic concession, which it actually was Donald Trump does not want to have responsibility for testing. He has wanted from the beginning to put this entire thing on states and cities, which do not have the resources, the power, the coordination capacity to solve the problems in the testing supply chain, not to mention to get the innovation we need to get the sort of 20, 25, 35 million tests a day that we will ultimately need to open up safely in the absence of a vaccine. He has never wanted this. He wants to be the head of state. He enjoys doing these press conferences, which is why he keeps doing them, despite the fact that they've often been bad for him. And now as people are finally pulling him off of it, but he has never wanted to do the hard work of daily governance, the grind of the meetings, the actual pushing of it. And we're all suffering for it.